Hello everyone, welcome to Coding with Ivan. Welcome to the fourth part of our Android food recipe app tutorial. So in the previous video we made our app till this point. If I open the app, it will load some random recipes. We implemented this spinner item where we can select any of the category and that will load recipes on that category. We can also search for specific items, like if I search for pasta, then it will load us some pasta recipes. Okay, so in today's video we are going to mainly add on click listener to each of these menu items, and whenever we will click on them it will open a new activity and there we will show all the details of that recipe. So let's get started. For this, at first we will create a new activity here. So here I'll right click on this package name and create a new activity and empty activity, and here I'll give a name to this activity. Let's call this as recipe details activity. Recipe details activity. All right, and then I'll click on finish. It will load and our activity should be ready. Alright, so as you can see our activity is now ready, our recipe detail activity. So at first here we will go to our main activity now. Let's close all the other items here. Okay, so we'll go to our main activity here and we need to add a on click listener to the recipe items, to each of these items. Okay, so for this we need to mainly go inside our adapter. So I'll go into this random recipe adapter. Okay, so here previously for the context we passed only a context and a list. So here I'll add a new item. We need to pass a listener also. We can pass a view on click listener, but I'll create a separate listener here. So I'll go to this listener, right click on it and create a new Java class. I'll call this as, let's say, recipe click listener. Okay, and that will be an interface. So click on interface. So here we got our interface, recipe click listener. So here inside this interface we will create a method. The return type is void and the method name will be on recipe clicked. Okay, and here on the parameter we will pass just a id, which is a string. Alright, so that's the only method we need. So now we can go to our random recipe adapter class, and here we'll define our object of this recipe click listener. So I'll write recipe click listener. I'll call this as listener. Alright, and we need to pass this listener to our constructor also. So here in the parameter of the constructor I'll write recipe click listener, and also inside the body I'll write this dot listener equals listener. Okay, so that's it for our constructor. Now we need to go under this on bind view holder. Okay, and here right after this we'll call our card view, which was the random list container that I showed you in the previous video. So here I'll call this holder dot random list container dot set on click listener, and here I'll create a new view dot on click listener. All right, and here on the on click method we'll call our listener that we just passed inside here. So listener dot we'll call our on recipe clicked method, and here we need to pass the id of that recipe. So we'll get this id from the list. So I'll write list dot get from, we can pass the position directly, but we'll use holder dot get adapter position, and then we'll write dot id. Okay, and as our id is an integer, yes, we need to convert this into a string. So to convert this, we'll cast this into a string like string dot value of, and inside the parameter of value of we'll pass this whole id. So I'll copy this from here and paste it right here. As you can see, it's now converted into a string. So that's it for the adapter. Now we need to go to our main activity here, because here we'll see some errors inside this adapter because we have updated our adapter now, adapters constructor mainly. So we need to pass the listener also here. Previously we were just passing the context and the list. Now we need to pass the listener. So let's create the listener right here. Let me zoom in more. So here I'll create the method, create the interface, private final recipe click listener. I'll call this as recipe click listener equals new recipe click listener, and here we got this recipe on recipe click method, and here we need to just put a semicolon. So this is our recipe click listener object. So we'll just copy this object name and we'll paste that inside our adapter here. Right after this list, I'll paste that. Okay, so our error is now gone. And now let's come to this on recipe clicked, and here at first I'll just simply show a toast message. So let's show this toast message, and for the context I'll pass main activity dot this. For the text I'll pass the id just. Okay, so now whenever the user will click on any specific recipe, this should show a toast message with the id of that recipe. So let's check this first in our app. So let's run our application once. So our app is now installed. These are all the recipes. So let's click on one of them. Let's click on this one. As you can see, it's showing the id as a toast message. We can click another one. Let's click this one. Here is the id. All right, so it's working fine. So now what we're going to do is we'll open a new activity when the user clicks on any item, and we'll show the details, and we'll fetch the details with the id that we got from here. We're going to call another API for that. So at first let's call the new activity here. So I'll just remove this toast message and I'll write a start activity, and I'll create a new intent from main activity dot this to recipe details activity dot class. Okay, and we'll also pass the id of that recipe with this intent. So here I'll go right here, go to a new line, and I'll write dot put extra, and here for the data name I'll write id, and for the data I'll pass this id from the parameter. So I'll write id here. Okay, so now that will pass this id to a new activity, which is our recipe detail activity. So now let's create the method to call the recipe details, and for this we'll go to our request manager class. Okay, and we'll go right here. After this call random recipes, we'll create another interface for the recipe details endpoint. But before that, let me show you the endpoint from our API documentation. So if we go to the documentation of Spoonacular API, so previously we used this get random recipes, and now we'll use this get recipe information endpoint, this one. So let's click on that. As you can see, this is the endpoint, and for the parameter we can pass this object, which is include nutrition. If it's false, then it won't send the nutrition details, and if it's true, then it will send. And we have to also pass this id, which is the id of that recipe. Okay, so let's add this into our Android Studio. So I'll just copy this endpoint right here. I'll copy this, and as it is also a get method, so we'll go to our Android Studio and create a new interface, private interface, call recipe details. Okay, and inside here our method was a get method, so I'll write get, and here in the parameter I'll pass the endpoint that we just copied from here. Okay, so I have pasted that here, and as you can see the ID here is now embedded to the URL, so it is a path, not like these queries. So we'll define that also. So under this, let's create a call method. So I'll write call, and this call will be for a specific response, so we need to create a model class for that. And for the response model, if we go to the API documentation, inside this get recipe information, as you can see here we have a example request and response. So this is the example request, but we need to copy this response only. So I'll start from here and I'll go all the way down to end of this response body, from this to this bracket. Okay, so I'll just copy this whole response, and we need to create a model class for that. So again I'll open the JSON to C# converter website, and I'll convert this into a Java class. So this is the website. I'll give the link of this one in the description also. So here I'll paste the response body that we just copied. Okay, and after that we'll click on convert here. As you can see, we got our Java class. So in the first video of this playlist, we created some classes like this metric and US. We have them in our models package, so we don't need to create them again. So at first we'll go all the way down to the root here, and we'll copy all of these objects inside this root class. So I'll copy them. Okay, and I'll go to our Android Studio, and here inside these models I'll right click on it and create a new Java class. I'll call this as recipe details response. Okay, hit enter, and inside here we'll paste the objects that we created. So as you can see, we have some errors here. So for this we need to click on it and click alt enter and import class. So our error is now gone. Let's go down, and here we need to just add this wine pairing object. Okay, so we need to create the class for this wine pairing. So let's go to the website again and search for the wine pairing class. Here we go. So I'll just copy the name from here and go back to Android Studio, and I'll create a new Java class. I'll paste the name, hit enter, and then for the class body again I'll copy the objects from here, go back and paste it here. Okay, let me zoom in. For this array list we just need to click on import class, and for the product match we need to create the product match class here. So again go to the website and search for product match. So here it is. I'll copy the class name from here, get back to Android Studio, create a new Java class. I'll paste it here, hit enter, and inside the class body we'll paste the items which are inside this product match. So I'll copy them and paste them here. Okay, so now all our class objects are added inside our recipe details response, as you can see. Okay, so now we can go to our request manager class here, and here inside this call parameter we will pass our recipe details response. Okay, and we will call this method as call recipe details. All right, and then inside the call recipe details parameter we need to pass this ID, and we need to also pass the API key, because we need to pass the API key on each API call. So here, as you can see, the ID is as a path inside this URL. So I'll define this as a path, and here we'll just replace this ID. So I'll copy this ID from here and paste it here, and for the ID we'll pass a new integer ID here, okay, comma, and the second parameter is the query. So for the query we'll pass the API key. Remember to use the K capital here, API key, and the API key is a string API key. All right, and we'll add a semicolon at the end. So that's it, our call recipe details interface. Now we'll create a method to access this interface. So here I'll go after this get random recipes method and create a new public void get recipe details, okay. And here for the parameter of this get recipe details we need to pass a listener. So let's create the listener here inside the listeners package. Right click on it and create a new Java class. I'll call this as recipe details listener, okay, and that will be an interface. So here we got the public interface recipe details listener. So inside this we'll create two methods. One is the void did fetch did fetch, okay, and here for the parameter we will pass the recipe details response. We'll call this as response, and the second parameter is a message. So let's string message, okay, and the next method is did error, and here we'll only pass the string message, okay. So that's it, our recipe details listener. Now let's go back to request manager.java again, and here for the get recipe details parameter we'll call our recipe details listener. So we'll write recipe details listener. I'll call this as listener, okay, and again we need to pass the ID. So I'll require a integer ID here, all right, and then we'll create the body of this method. So here we'll call this call recipe details interface. So I'll write call recipe details interface. I'll name this as call recipe details equals retrofit dot create call recipe details dot class, okay, and semicolon at the end, and then we will create a call method. Sorry, we'll create a call object. So I'll write call for recipe details response. I'll name this as call equals, we'll get this call recipe details dot call recipe details, okay, and here for the parameter we need to pass the ID and the API key. So for the ID I'll pass the ID from the parameter, and for the API key I'll write context dot get string r dot string dot API key, okay, add a semicolon at the end, and then we'll just enqueue this call. So I'll write call dot enqueue, and we'll create a new callback here. So let new callback for recipe details response. Here we got this on response and on failure method. So for the on response we'll check first if the response is not successful. So I'll write not response dot is successful. So if the response is not successful, then we'll call the listener dot did error, and here we'll pass the message. So I'll write response dot message, okay, and we'll return from here. And if the response is successful, then we'll go outside of this if statement, and we'll call the listener dot did fetch, and here we'll pass the response body. So response dot body, and for the message we'll pass response.message. All right, and again for the did failure, I'll call the listener dot did error, and we'll pass the message from this throwable t. So I'll t dot get message. Okay, so that's it for the get recipe details method. We can now call this from our main activity or the recipe details activity. So we'll call this from the recipe details activity mainly. So let's do that. But at first let me show you something else, that is our API calling. If we go to the documentation, if we go to the overview, my console, okay, so here as you can see, every day we get a limit of 150 points. So if your API hits are reached to the 150 points level, then or won't be able to hit more requests. So in that case, I'll suggest you to create a new API key from here, from the profile. All right, and now let's go to the full documentation again for the recipe information. Okay, so let's go back to Android Studio, and here we'll work on the to show the recipe details inside our recipe details activity. So let's close all of this, close all tabs, and I'll go to our main activity. And as you can see, whenever we'll click on the any recipes, it will load the recipe details activity, and it will pass this ID to this recipe details activity. So now what we need to do is we need to go to the recipe details activity and capture this ID from the intent, and then we'll call the new API that we just created, the method. We will just call this method from that activity. So I'll go to this recipe details activity, and from here let's try to capture the ID first. So for this, here I'll create a global object called okay, let's keep this integer int ID. Okay, and then we'll go here and we'll try to capture the ID from the intent. So we'll write here ID equals get intent dot get string extra, and here for the name of this data, as you can see inside the main activity we passed the name as ID. So here I'll also pass the name ID, add a semicolon here, and as you can see it's showing an error because this is a string and this ID here is an integer. So we need to cast this string into an integer. So I'll write integer dot parseInt, and here we'll pass this whole ID. So I'll copy this and paste it inside here. Okay, so as you can see our error is now gone. So now we can call the get recipe details API with this ID. But before calling the API, I'll design our layout for the activity recipe details. So let me go to the layout of activity recipe details here. So here I'll make some changes. At first I'll change the parent layout to a linear layout. Okay, and for the width height I'll keep this as match parent. I'll add the orientation to vertical here, and then inside this linear layout I'll add a toolbar. Okay, and for the width I'll pass match parent. For the height I'll pass attribute slash action bar size to give this the default size of an action bar. Close this tag here. Okay, let's add a background color for this linear layout. We used orange on the previous activity, so here I'll do the same background at the red color slash orange. Okay, so here for the toolbar I'll give this toolbar a title. I'll call this as details. Okay, then I'll pass the title text color to color white. Okay, so let's write here recipe details. All right, okay, so now let's go after this toolbar, and here I'll create a new scroll view. Scroll view. For the width I'll pass match parent, for the height I'll pass match parent here. Let's close this scroll view like this, and here inside this scroll view I'll create a new linear layout. For the width I'll pass match parent, and for the height I'll pass wrap content here. Let's close this linear layout here, and here for the orientation of this linear layout I'll pass vertical, and for the gravity of this I'll pass center. And then inside this linear layout we'll add some more views. At first I'll add a new text view to show the recipe full name. So for the width of this I'll pass match parent, for the height I'll pass wrap content here. Let's close this text view, and I'll give this an ID. I'll call this as text view underscore meal underscore name. Okay, let's add a demo text here. So I'll write recipe name. Okay, then let's add a new text size. For this I'll pass here as 18 sp. Actually let's make it 20 sp to look much bigger. So 20 sp is fine, I guess. And then I'll set its gravity to be center, and then I'll set the text color to color white, and I'll give this a padding of 8 dp. I'll also set the text style to be bold for the name. Okay, and then after this text view we'll add another text view to show the source name of that recipe. So I'll add a new text view. For the width I'll pass match parent, height I'll pass wrap content here. Close this tag, and for the ID I'll pass text view underscore meal underscore source. Okay, and for the text I'll write source. Let's also align this to the center. So I'll write gravity to center. Then for the text style I'll pass italic here. Then for the text color I'll pass white, and for the text size I'll pass here, let's say 14 sp. Okay, let's also give this a padding of 8 dp. And after this text view we'll create an image view here that will show the image of that recipe or that food. So for the width I'll pass here match parent, and for the height I'll pass, let's say 250 dp. Okay, and close this tag. Here I'll give this image view an ID. I'll call this as image view underscore meal underscore image. Okay, and then I'll give this a overall margin of 8 dp, and I'll make this a scale type of center crop so that it fits properly with the height and width. And then after this image view we'll add another text view to show the summary of that meal. So I'll add a new text view. For the width I'll pass here match parent, for the height I'll pass wrap content here. Close this tag. I'll give this text view an ID. I'll call this as text view underscore meal underscore summary. Okay, let's set the default text as summary. Then the text size, let's pass this as 14 sp. Then for the text color I'll pass white here. Text style I'll pass let's say normal, and give this a padding of 8 dp. Okay, and let's also give this a overall margin of 8 dp. All right, so that's it for the summary text view. Now we'll go under this text view, and here we'll show the ingredients of that recipe in a recycler view. So but before showing the recycler view I'll add a text view which will say the ingredients. So for the width I'll pass match parent, for height I'll pass wrap content here. Let's close this text view tag, and we don't need to pass any ID here. I'll just pass a default text as ingredients. Okay, let's for the text style I'll pass here bold, text color white, text size, let's say 18 sp, give this a padding of 8 dp, and gravity center. Okay, so that's it for the ingredients text view. And now under this text view we'll create a new recycler view, and for the width help us match parent, for the height help us wrap content here. Let's close this recycler view, and I'll give this recycler view an ID. I'll call this as recycler underscore meal underscore ingredients. Okay, and let's give this a margin of 8 dp. Okay, so that's it for this part of the UI. Now let's work on them inside our activity class. So I'll go to the recipe details activity, and at first we need to initialize all these views. So there are lots of views as you can see, and we'll add more views in the next part. So we'll create a separate method for that. So here at first, after the set content, I'll call a new method, find views. Okay, and we need to create this method. So I'll write I'll just click on this red bulb and click on this create method find views. So here we got the find views method, and inside here we'll initialize all of them, but before we need to create objects for them. So at first I'll add a text view object. So let me go to the XML file of this activity recipe details. So let's start from the beginning. So here we have this text view for the meal name. So I'll copy the ID and paste it here. Then we have another text view for the meal source. I'll copy this and add this after this. And then we have this image view meal image. I'll copy this and I'll create a add a semicolon, and then I'll create a new image view object in the new line and paste the ID of that image view. Okay, so after that we have another text view for the meal summary. So I'll copy this and paste it after this meal source. And then we have another, okay, so we don't have any more text view, we just have this recycler view, the recycler meal ingredients. So I'll copy this recycler meal ingredients ID, and here I'll create a new recycler view object. I'll pass the ID. Okay, so these are the view items. So I'll just initialize them one by one into this find views method, equals find view by ID r.id dot text view meal name. So similarly I'll do for this for all of the rest. And now we'll just call our API and we'll show all the data inside these views. So for this I'll just go after getting this ID, and we need to call the API. So we need the manager classes object. So I'll create this here, request manager. Okay, I'll call this as manager, and also let's create a progress dialog object, progress dialog, call this dialog. All right, and then right here I'll initialize this manager. So manager equals new request manager. For the context I'll pass this, and then I'll call the manager dot get recipe details. We'll call the get recipe details, and here for the parameter we need to pass the recipe details listener and the ID of that recipe. So we got the ID here. Now we need to just create the recipe details listener object. So we'll just go after this on create method, and we'll create the recipe details listener object. So I'll create a private final recipe details listener. I'll call this as listener equals new recipe details listener. So here we got this method. Here we need to put a semicolon, and this is the listener. So let's name this as recipe details listener. Okay, so we'll copy the name recipe details listener and we'll go up and paste it here as the first parameter, and the second parameter will pass this ID. Okay, all right, and after calling this API we'll just show our dialog. So let's set up our progress dialog. So let dialog equals new progress dialog. I'll pass the context this, and then I'll write dialog dot set title, and I'll write loading details. Okay, and then I'll write dialog dot show. Okay, so now once we receive the data from the did fetch, we'll just dismiss our dialog first. So I'll write dialog dot dismiss, and then we'll show the data. So to show the data, if we go to the API documentation, as you can see inside the response body here, we got lots of items here: the title, image, total servings, time, source name, and also some more attributes, the likes, health score, some URL, dish types, etc. So we got a lots of items. You can add as many as you want, but I am just adding some items in this example. You can play with all these objects here in your own project. Okay, so at first we'll show the title, then the image, then the source, the summary, and the ingredients. Okay, so for this here at first we'll call this text view meal name. So I'll write text view meal name dot set text, and here we'll pass we'll call actually the response first. So I'll write response dot title. Okay, as you can see here, this is the title. So after the title we need to show the source name. So the source name is under this tag, the source name. So I'll go here and I'll call this text view meal source dot set text. I'll call response dot source name. Okay, and after that we'll add the summary. So the summary is under this as you can see here, we got the summary. So we'll just show that. So go back to Android Studio, and here I'll call the text view meal summary dot set text response dot summary. Okay, and then for the image view meal image, we will load this with Picasso. So I'll write Picasso dot get dot load, and here for the parameter of load we need to pass the URL. And if we go up here, as you can see, the URL is inside the tag or inside the object called image. So here I'll write response dot image. Okay, add a semicolon at the end. No, we need to also pass the target. So I'll write dot into, and here we'll pass the image views ID, image view meal image. So I'll write image view meal image here. Okay, so right after that we need to show the recycler meal ingredients. So for this we need to create an adapter and a custom layout for the recycler view. So here at first we'll create a new custom layout. So I'll right click on the layout and create a new layout resource file. I'll call this as list underscore meal underscore ingredients. Okay, and hit enter. Go to split view and zoom in, and here I'll make some changes. And at first I'll just replace this parent layout with a card view. For the width I'll pass match parent, and for the height I'll change it to wrap content here. And let's add some more attributes like the card background color to color white here, and then let's give this a card elevation of 8 dp, and let's give this a margin of 8 dp. Okay, and then inside this card view we'll create a new linear layout. For the width I'll pass here Okay, let's do one thing. Let's show all these ingredients in a horizontal recycler view. Okay, so for this I'll change the layout width to wrap content. Make sure you change that width wrap content, height wrap content, and here inside this linear layout for the width I'll pass here as match parent, and for the height I'll pass here as wrap content. Okay, and then I'll add the orientation for this to vertical. Then let's close this linear layout, and inside this I'll first add a new text view, and for the width I'll pass here match parent, and for the height I'll pass here wrap content. Okay, let's close this tag here, and I'll give this text view an ID. I'll call this as a text view underscore ingredients underscore title. Okay, not title actually. At first we'll show the quantity. Okay, and then after this let's add a sample text. So I'll pass, let's say, one piece. One piece. Okay, and then let's add or change the text color. So for the text color I'll pass color black here. Okay, let's set the text to the center. So I'll write text alignment to be center. Okay, also let's change the text size to let's say 16 sp. All right, and let's give this a padding of 4 dp. Okay, now under this text view we'll show an image view where we'll show the image of that ingredient. So for the width here I'll pass 80 dp, and for the height I'll pass here 50 dp. Okay, let's close this tag, and then let's give this image view an ID. I'll call this as image view underscore ingredients. Okay, and I'll set the scale type to center. All right, and then under this image view I'll add another text view where I'll show the name of the ingredients. So for the width I'll pass match parent, and height I'll pass wrap content. Close this tag. I'll give this text view an ID. I'll call this text view underscore ingredients underscore name. Okay, and for the text I'll pass let's say chicken. Okay, and then for the text size again I'll pass 16 sp. Then for the text alignment I'll pass center. Then for the text color I'll pass black. Then for the text style I'll pass bold here, and then for the let's give this a padding of 4 dp. Okay, so that's it for the custom recycler view layout for the ingredients. Now we need to create an adapter for this custom recycler view. So for this I'll create a new class inside this adapters. Create a new Java class. I'll call this as ingredients adapter. Okay, ingredients adapter. Hit enter, and here is our ingredients adapter class, and we also need a view holder class. So I'll go outside this ingredients adapter class and create a separate ingredients view holder class. Okay, and I'll make this class extends the default view holder class of recycler view. So recycler view dot view holder, click the balloon and click on create constructor matching super. Here we got the constructor. Now I need to create objects for the view items. So I'll go to this list mill ingredients, and from here I'll at first copy the ID of this text view. So I'll copy this, go back to ingredients adapter, create a text view object, paste the ID of this text view, and for the second text view also I'll copy the ID and paste it right after this. Okay, and after that we'll create an image view object where we'll pass the ID of that image view ingredients, copy, paste. Okay, So now we need to initialize them inside this constructor. So I'll copy the ID from here, paste it here, equals item view dot find view by ID r dot id dot. Okay, the R is showing an error. We'll click on that and click on the bulb, click on import class. It's now solved. Put a semicolon at the end, and similarly I'll do for the rest two items. Copy this ID, paste it here, paste it here, copy this ID, paste it here, and paste it here. Okay, so our views are now initialized. Now we can work inside the ingredient adapter class. So I'll make this class extends the default class for the recycler views adapter. So recycler view dot adapter, and here in the angle bracket we need to pass the adapter. So I'll copy this ingredients view holder. Sorry, we need to pass the view holder. So I'll copy this ingredients view holder and paste it here. It will show some error. We need to just implement these methods. We'll select all of these three and click on OK. So here we got these three methods. Okay, so at first we'll go up here and we'll create some objects. So first we'll create an object for the context. I'll call this context, and then we need a list of ingredients. So I'll create a list of, as you can see, if we go to the API documentation, if we scroll down to the ingredients, our ingredients are inside this extended ingredients. So I'll go back to Android Studio and create a list of the extended ingredients, extended ingredient. Okay, I'll call this as list. All right, and then we'll need a constructor. So I'll right click on the empty space, click on generate, click on constructor, and select both of them and hit enter. So here we got our constructor, as you can see. So now we can work on these three methods. So at first here, instead of returning null inside the onCreate view holder, we'll return a new ingredients view holder. I'll call the layout inflator dot from. I'll pass the context dot inflate. I'll pass the layout r dot layout dot list meal ingredients that we created, this one, and the second parameter is the parent, and third one is false. Okay, so that's it for the onCreate view holder. Then for the onBind view holder, we'll call holder dot text view ingredients name dot set text, and here we'll pass, let's say, list dot get from position dot name. Okay, and then for the ingredients quantity, I'll call holder dot text view ingredients quantity dot set text. I'll pass list dot get from position dot okay, let me show the documentation. As you can see, inside the extended ingredients, the quantity is inside the object called original. Okay, so we'll call this dot original here. All right, and then for the image of that ingredient, I'll call Picasso dot get dot load, and the image URL is, as you can see, the image is called butterslice.jpg. We don't have the full URL of that image, so I've already captured the full URL of that image. So I'll just add that into the code here. So you can also add that. Actually, you have to add that. Okay, so I'm adding this. You just have to pass or write this exact same thing. I'll also try to give this link in the description. From there you can copy this and add this here. So after pasting it here, after this quotation, I'll write plus, and then we'll add this image URL, okay, or the image name. So go back to Android Studio, and here I'll call list dot get from position dot image. Okay, Okay, we also need to pass the target view, so I'll write dot into, and here I'll pass holder dot image view ingredients. Okay, so that's it. And now for the get item count, we need to pass list dot size. Make sure you add that. Okay, so now we have a confusion here, because if our, as you can see inside the custom layout of the list ingredients, we have this text view, and if any of the text is large, then it will divide into two lines, but we don't want that. So I'll add a horizontal scrolling effect in both of these text views. So let's do that. So at first I'll go to this first text view and I'll write single line true, and then I'll write ellipse size to marquee, and then the marquee repeat limit to marquee forever, and then scroll horizontally to true. And I'll copy these 4 attributes from this text view, and I'll also paste it into the second text view. Okay, that's it. And now we need to go back to the ingredients adapter again, and here we will just make this text view selected. So I'll write holder dot text view ingredients name dot set selected to true. Similarly, holder dot text view ingredients quantity dot set selected to true. Okay, so our adapter class is now ready. Now we can show the list of ingredients in the recipe details activity. So here in the recipe details activity, we'll go into this did fetch method, and here right after this line we'll initialize our recycler view. So I'll recycler meal ingredients dot set has fixed size to true. We'll also add a layout manager. So recycler meal ingredients dot set layout manager new linear layout manager. Okay, and here for the parameter, at first I'll pass the context, and the second parameter is the orientation. So I'll write linear layout manager dot horizontal, and the third parameter is false. Okay, so as you can see here, for the context we're getting an error for this. So I'll change it into, as our activity is recipe details activity, so I'll write recipe details activity dot this. Okay, so this is our layout manager for the recycler view. Okay, so now we need to create an object for the adapter. So let me define the adapter object up here. So I'll call this as ingredients adapter. I'll name this as ingredient adapter. Okay, and we'll initialize it inside here right after this layout manager. I'll go to a new line and I'll call this ingredients adapter equals new ingredients adapter, and for the context I'll pass let's say recipe details activity dot this, and then for the list of the extended ingredient I'll write response dot extended ingredients, and I'll add a semicolon at the end. Okay, so that's it. Now we need to attach this ingredients adapter to the recycler view. So I'll go to a new line, and here I'll write recycler meal ingredients dot set adapter, and I'll pass this ingredients adapter. I'll copy this and paste it here. Okay, so that will show all the data inside our views. And then for the did error, we'll just show a toast message. For the context I'll pass recipe details activity dot this, and for the text I'll pass the message from here. Okay, so that's it. Now let's run our application once to see the changes. So I'll run it. it's loading, and here we got all the meals. So now let's click on any one of them. Let's click on this one. It's loading, and here we got the details. We got the recipe name, the source of that recipe, the image, and the details of that recipe, and also we got these ingredients in a horizontal recycler view. Okay, text view are also giving a horizontal scrolling effect. Okay, nice. So let's try another one. Let's try this one. Okay, cool. So our app is working fine. So that's it for this video. In the next part, we will add more items like the step-by-step guides for each of the recipes and also the nutrition chart and etc. Okay, so thank you so much for watching, guys.